join me in welcoming my wonderful friend from the great state of Texas, Jose Velasco. From California via India, we have VR Ferose, and we have Thorkil, Sonne. And I cannot wait to hear this presentation. So give them a round of applause. Please use that, and welcome, fathers. Mwah! I can't wait to hear you today.
Thank you so much to the entire staff, Dr. Pellegrino, Dr. Dalgin, Dr. Brook. Very special thank you also for Father Marina, Mr. and Mrs. Leahy, and also to Mr. John Crossgrove. Today's presentation is a little bit of a follow-up of what we had last year, where I had the great pleasure of talking about the SAP Autism at Work program. For those of you who are not familiar with this program, it's an enterprise program, dedicated program that has as main objective of the provisioning of opportunities, job opportunities, experience opportunities in the enterprise for autistic individuals. The reason why I say that this conversation would not be complete without Thorkil and without Ferose is because a great deal of the work that has been done at SAP rests on the shoulders of both Thorkil, Sonne, and Ferose VR. And what we would like to do today is share with you a little bit of the journey that we have had collectively as parents, but also as professionals that are looking into the topic of disability employment. What we would like to do today is give you this very brief introduction and jump right away into journeys. I think you would be delighted to hear the incredible experience and the trajectories of both Ferose and Thorkil, how they engage with this topic and how they use their talents, skills, abilities, and their enterprise knowledge in order to launch programs that, quite frankly, are the basis for what we see right now as neurodiversity in the workplace programs. We will move on to a topic that I think is very important for us, and it's what we call the unexpected, where we will be talking a little bit about what obstacles both Thorkil and Ferose had during the initial phases of these programs that we call today Autism at Work programs, but also, very importantly, what are the experiences that we have picked up along the way in the times of COVID. Completely unexpected times with opportunities and also tremendous challenges. So we'll hear a little bit about the experiences that both Thorkil and Ferose have had. This conversation, of course, would not be complete without talking a little bit about the future. What does the future hold in the enterprise world? And now, when I talk about enterprises, I'm not just talking about large companies, I'm talking about companies that are small and large in the development of autism hiring programs. We would move on then to what would you tell? And these are three questions that I will have for them. What would you tell the audience? What would you tell our autistic friends that are part of the audience today? And what would you tell your 16-year-old self? You know, as you were, if you were somebody who was in today's day with the experience that you have. We will move to questions and answers, and then lastly, some closing remarks. So let's go ahead and get started and jump right away into journeys. And I would like to start with you, Thorkil, if you would introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what does this autism hiring movement is and how was it born? All yours.
Well, thanks so much, Jose, and thanks for this opportunity to share the journey and the vision and our experiences. We appreciate that very much. I was a traditional family guy. When my youngest son was diagnosed with autism, I was a technical director in an IT company. I had 3 kids. Career was on track, company car and everything. But my autistic son really changed my perspective in life. We were surprised that he got the autism diagnosis because at home where he was comfortable, he was very much like his older siblings. But in the kindergarten with 30 kids and adults wanting him to play social games, he tried to find the swing in the garden or the quiet corner. But there are not many of those in traditional kindergartens. So we were taken by surprise, and it took time to get to know him. But we were really puzzled about the kind of disability and disorder thing, because he was very much like his older siblings. When comfortable, he was trustworthy, he was caring, he was everything you would want from a child. And we also learned that the perspectives are dire, the dropout rate, the bullying, being rejected maybe from the labor market. It's very difficult. And he inspired me to question our society, saying, instead of training autistic people to behave like non-autistic people so they can fit in somewhere, why don't we change the labor market, the education system, the society instead, to make them also get the pleasure of diversity. People on autistic people and people with ADHD and similar, they're not, in my eyes, broken toys that need to be fixed. It's really up to all of us to be able to have societies where all kinds of people are welcomed. I quit my job as a technical director and started as a social entrepreneur, trying to solve a social challenge with a business model. I started Specialisterne, which is Danish for the specialists, to pave a way for those who are not the generalist type of people, who have all the benefits of well-defined recruitment and management processes. And I started without knowing how to run a business. I just felt I did not have any choice. I have to do something. We launched Specialisterne in 2004, and soon afterwards, emails started coming in from all over the world. I'd received emails mostly from parents in more than 100 countries. And when they ask for help, I cannot say no, because I feel we are part of a global family of people in similar situations, just in different cultures and geographies. So I set the goal of 1 million jobs and started a nonprofit foundation in Denmark with the ambition to make it work in Denmark and bring it out in the world. Not a copy of how things work in Denmark, but the basic understanding concept that can be localized and fits with different cultures and local governments and communities. So my board said 1 million job, that's a high goal in a country with 5 million people. You have to move to the US when the opportunity comes, because that's where the big wheels need to get spinning if you want to reach the goal. So in 2013, I relocated with my family to Delaware, USA. And we started the Specialisterne concept in an American version. And this is where I met Jose when the partnership with SAP and Specialisterne Foundation was announced. It was 5 fantastic years in the US, and we did get the big wheels spinning, many big companies. I was invited to the United Nations to speak at this at a global level. And today, Specialisterne Foundation is associated with the United Nations Department of Global Communications and bringing out the message that autistic and neurodivergent persons as such can provide very important value for employers, for the education system, for communities around the world. So it's like one thing that I did. I do not have any particular knowledge on how to run business and be an entrepreneur, but I think there are so many of us out there who also feel today they are not, what can they do? But actually, I think the stories you'll hear from Ferose and Jose will really underline that not any individuals can change the world, but if we play our parts, all of us, then we can change the world for sure. So over to you, Ferose.
Thank you. Firstly, a big congratulations to the University of Scranton for the 20th year of the conference. So I'm honored to be invited to this amazing event, and it's such a pleasure to be speaking to Thorkil and Jose, who are dear friends and wise men amongst all of us here. And I use the word wise with a tinge of humor because Jose is not just a dad, but a grandfather himself, and Thorkil is soon becoming one. So I kind of want to share that I'm still the younger one in this group. So forgive me, guys. I know you want to kind of hide that fact, but I'm not letting you do that. But I've been, I've been fortunate to stand on the shoulders of people like Thorkil and Jose, and being the younger one in the group means that I can follow their footsteps in their journeys, as well as fathers of autistic or children on the spectrum. My son, Vivan, is 12 and a half years old. And so my journey started 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, when Vivan was diagnosed with autism at the age of, I would say, 18 months. And if I have to rewind a little bit, I have to tell you I was based in Bangalore at that time, and I was heading SAP in India. I was having what I think was a well-scripted life where I was one of the younger CEOs of a global multinational in India. I had married my college sweetheart, and I had a perfectly healthy son. And I thought this is like the perfect script for a life. And until my son's diagnosis happened. And when his diagnosis happened, I thought the world had come to an end for me. I went through a phase of denial, went into depression, until my mentor called me and gave me a piece of advice, which I think has been the tipping point of my entire life journey. She had called me, her name is Dr. Kiran Bedi, and she is one of the icons in India. And I've been very fortunate to know her very closely, worked with her very closely. And after my son's diagnosis, I'd kind of cut myself off from a lot of my close friends. And one day she called me and said, Ferose, what happened? Why this radio silence? Why haven't you picking up my calls or messaging me? And I kind of broke down and said, you know what? Vivan is diagnosed with autism. I don't know what to do. And I kind of broke down. And she said, Ferose, most people spend their entire life not knowing what their purpose is. You are incredibly fortunate the purpose found you. And for me, that moment was when I started seeing the world differently. From seeing myself as a victim, I started seeing myself as somebody who's in a position where I can not just make a difference to Vivan, but really make a difference to the community at large. But honestly, I didn't know what to do. I had no clue what autism was. Remember, I'm based in India, where disability is seen as a taboo. Nobody knew what autism was. There was no infrastructure, there was no government aid, there was no therapists. So this was really coming from a place where really not much was neither aware nor available. But once I started looking at this as an opportunity to drive change, I started reaching out to people. And I was fortunately connected to Thorkil. Somebody said, "Oh, meet this guy, he's a great guy." And for some reason, timing was perfect. Thorkil was actually coming to India. And I invited Thorkil to speak at SAP. And that kind of started a series of things. I was so inspired by what Thorkil had done in Denmark that I actually decided to fly to Denmark. So I flew over to Denmark along with my assistant. We spent 2 days in Thorkil's office, and I was really inspired by what I saw. And I came back and told my HR, you know what, let's hire people on the autism spectrum. And everybody literally fell off their chairs. They had no clue what I was talking about. And, some of them even said, "Ferose, are you smoking? Do you even know what autism is, and how the hell are we going to do this?" And to cut a long story short, within the next 6 months, we hired the first 3 employees at SAP in Bangalore who were on the autism spectrum. And that's how we started. And these 3 were, didn't have college degrees. They had no background in computer science. They knew how to browse the internet, and they knew a little bit about how to get through social media and so on. But that's all that they knew. And we said, no, we will train them. We will train them for specific jobs. And we started with testing, because that's what I saw Thorkil had tried and proved. And so that's where we started. And what followed after that was nothing but a series of coincidences. And often people ask me, how the hell did this that started as a volunteer effort went on to become such a global program? I think it was nothing but a series of coincidences. It is what I call as goodwill gone viral. Good people came together with good intentions, and good things happened. One thing led to the other. I was fortunately invited to the World Economic Forum in Davos, where I gave a speech about how hiring people on the autism spectrum makes business sense. Thorkil was there when I gave that speech. That speech was carried by CNN the next day, and our CEOs were there. I met them, and they asked me, "Ferose, are you hiring people on the spectrum?" And I said, yes. And the only thing is I didn't tell anybody. I just did it. And they were so inspired. They said, we need to see what you're doing. So they immediately sent our Chief Diversity Inclusion Officer to Bangalore to see what we were trying to do. She was very inspired by what she saw. And that led to SAP making the announcement of hiring 1% of its global workforce on the autism spectrum in May 2013. So, what really started as a small volunteer effort really found wings over the next couple of years. And, that is where I think Jose comes into the picture. I'd never met Jose before, but obviously we realized that if it's a global program, it has to be successful in the US as well. And Jose was, of course, leading those activities in the US. And so in many ways, Thorkil, Jose has been an integral part of this journey. And I've been very fortunate to be connected to both of them through this program. And it's, I would say, almost a decade since the program started. And I'm delighted that what started as a SAP initiative has now gone global, and hundreds of companies have their own Autism at Work program. So that's, in short, my journey in the autism space. Back to you, Jose.
Absolutely. I have a couple of remarks. Thank you, Thorkil, and thank you, Ferose, for this. And just to clarify for our audience, this type of programs, launching an enterprise program to hire somebody on the autism spectrum, requires deep partnership. It is incredibly important for companies like ours to count with partnerships like the one that we've had with Specialisterne. I believe that the growth of this type of programs, again, depends on this type of ecosystem. We'll talk a little bit more about this in the future section here of our presentation. Thorkil, just for clarification, Specialisterne is present in more than 10 countries today. Can you tell us a little bit more about the footprint of where Specialisterne is located today?
Yes, thanks, Ferose, Jose. We started off in Denmark, and then we expanded in Europe, and later on in Canada and USA, and then Brazil. We are starting up in Mexico as well, and so from Mexico to Australia, with the majority in Europe. So we are represented in 13 countries at the moment. And then we have partners in a number of additional countries, so we can serve global companies as clients.
Jose, you're on mute.
Here are some of our favorite pictures that I thought I would put in front of our audience and just share a little bit about its journey. You mentioned, Thorkil, your participation at the United Nations. I believe it was in 2014 or 2015.
I take the Acapella off?
When you were one of the key, if not the most notable speaker during Autism Awareness Day. Second picture that we see here is the launch of the Autism at Work program in Palo Alto, California, with our first 7 employees in the city of Palo Alto. And at the bottom right, basically is the secret sauce of Specialisterne, which is the utilization of special methods, utilizing robotics to try for us to understand the skills and abilities that folks on the spectrum bring into the workplace. Methodologies have been developed over many, many years that are proven and that have had an impact on enterprises on how we assess the skills and abilities of folks without having to go through a traditional interview process. This requires a lot of ingenuity, a lot of creativity, and that is something that Ferose and Thorkil put together in the early days. Let's go and talk a little bit about the unexpected, Thorkil and Ferose. Tell us a little bit about the early challenges that you found, but also about the most recent challenges that we've seen as society. You know, if we can start with you, Thorkil, that would be wonderful.
Thank you. There are so many things you can talk about, but I think an observation in general is that I see so many unpolished diamonds among autistic people. And when I started, I was really struggling. How do I find out what the autistic people excel at? Because they won't have any papers from schools or from employers stating what they are good at. So my ambition was to hire autistic people to compete at market terms in Denmark. So my competitors could put ads in the paper and hire those with the best education and best experience, but what should I do? And this is where I reflected on when I was heading a local branch of Autism Denmark. A lot of parents came together, and I arranged the first networks, and I had prepared an agenda, but we only got to point item 1, introduction, because there was such a need to talk about the kids and what's difficult and what's fun. But one of the observations I had was that one of the moments of pride for many parents was when the kids were playing with Lego bricks and blocks. And that was kind of an engineering type of play that seems to suit autistic people well. And the parents were so proud. They were better at that than the neighbors' kids. While the neighbors' kids, they were the most popular and the ones most successful in education. So I thought I need to find a way to make autistic people show me instead of tell me what they're good at and what it will take for them to excel. And play really is the secret sauce. It's not so secret. It can be announced here. Play is good. Play is a secret sauce. Everyone should be very, very good at playing with autistic people in the families, in the schools, in the workplace. Jose and Ferose have experienced that firsthand. When you see autistic people think they are playing with Lego Mindstorms robots, actually they are telling about a lot of themselves, motivation, work ability, their professional skills, their personal specialist skills, and the skills you share with others. Many have been told that teamwork would not be a thing for them, but when you play, everything is possible, and you forget the barriers. So I think this is the secret sauce that I would like to open up and share with all of you. Play is good. Play is good for learning. Play is good for inclusion. Play is good for leveling the playground for everyone to be together.
This is a methodology that we utilized heavily in the formation, if you want to call it that, the establishment of the Autism at Work program, where again we decided to change the methods that we use to get to understand the skills and abilities of folks on the spectrum. So just to give our audience a little bit of color around this, the Autism at Work program at SAP today is in 16 countries and has provided more than 600 opportunities for autistic people, ranging from high school exposure opportunities all the way to full-time employment, part-time employment, and internships and fellowships. But this program was based on the basis that we would have a different method and a different intake method in which we would assess the capabilities of people, and the individuals would assess SAP by having a longer experience, not a touch point based on just one interview. So we have programs around the world that vary from 2 weeks all the way to 4 weeks that allow us to get to know the individuals better, and for the individuals that are interested in a job at SAP to also get to know us a little bit better. And as Thorkil was mentioning, the basis for these methodologies are completely untraditional. Okay, we utilize Legos and other methods to get to understand a little bit more about how people interact with one another, the strengths that people have, those things that normally we would not get on an interview, we're able to harvest via these experiences that Thorkil was talking about. Moving over to Ferose. Ferose, if you can comment a little bit on the unexpected, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, and let me share my thoughts from a corporate perspective, because I think that's a very important insight for the audience. And when I look back at why and how did the program jumpstart at SAP and why did it achieve the scale it did, and I'm often asked this question: what was the plan? How did this happen? And when I look back, I keep telling people, actually, there was no plan. It was pretty accidental that it became what it did, but there was an incredible message in that journey, and that was the reason it was successful was because we focused on innovation. That's the single most important reason why it was successful at SAP. We focused on innovation. We did not focus on diversity and inclusion. And I'm saying this loud and clear. We are talking about 2011 when we started the program in India. Diversity and inclusion was not on the board agenda of any of the companies. It has become extremely central and relevant today. But in 2011, diversity and inclusion was not on any board agenda. It was not in SAP's agenda. I can tell you this because I was heading SAP in India. And I wrote the first press brief, and you could Google it even now. And SAP's press brief said that we are hiring people on the autism spectrum because innovation happens at the edges. And that was the key point. We didn't do it because it was good PR. We did not do it because it was part of CSR. We did not do it because it was diversity and inclusion. We did it because we felt that when people who think differently, who see the world differently, will solve problems fundamentally differently from everybody else. And so our focus was on innovation. And that was the reason why it was so attractive, not just to SAP, but every other company that followed SAP, that the focus was on innovation. And the reason I'm telling this now is that sometimes I find that people are doing it because they have a D&I quota, they want to get some numbers, and that may not necessarily be the right reason to do it. You have to do it because it makes business sense. And this is what Thorkil has been speaking about. This is what I have said at the World Economic Forum, that hiring people on the autism spectrum made business sense, because that's the only way you're going to scale this program. So if there's one key insight and one key takeaway, this is it, that hiring people on the autism spectrum is an innovation imperative.
Quick question for both of you. Unexpected also covers many different obstacles that we've had, in launching this type of programs and in recruiting people and bringing them to the jobs that they need. But also there's circumstances around our environment. I mean, the most visible one for us is COVID. What are your impressions? How has that impacted the autistic community? Maybe we can start with you, Thorkil, very quickly on that.
Yes, COVID, of course, was a major disruptor in all Specialisterne activities, because the magic had taken place when people met who have not met before and played together and talked and communicated and did things together. So we were really disrupted big time by COVID. But we managed quite rapidly to move, to change, to innovate, to adapt, and also to benefit from the virtual way of working together. And actually found that that was kind of a relief for many situations where autistic people, when they communicate through chats, mails, video conferences, you have to be very precise. There's not all the unspoken hints that you have to understand and relate to all the time. You have to be precise. You have to set expectations clearly, make it obvious what you mean and what is your plan and what will happen next. When you work remotely, planning is of course key, and also follow up and discuss. But you don't have to be in a room and fight to get the word and trying to figure out when do you get in there. On the internet, when you do virtual stuff, you raise the hand and then take your turn when it's your time. So that was actually for many a very good way where we could invite the traditional co-workers and managers into a space of work where many autistic people were very comfortable. So that was a positive experience. Another experience is that when they get back to work in a blended work environment, before COVID, it was very much you had to excel in social skills. You had to be good at the water cooler chit chat. You had to be able to read the expectations and sometimes handshake, hugs. But now it's very important that when you're back in the workplace, that you follow instructions carefully. You have to follow procedures to make sure that we don't get into any more health issues. You have to be okay to withdraw from major gatherings, try to avoid too much physical contact, and also prepare the work so well that if tomorrow there's someone pushes the button and says, now there's a new health situation that means you have to work from home, then you're ready for that. But also the opportunity to work part-time from office and part-time from home can make life ends for more autistic people. So actually, I would say for the first time in centuries, the workplace paradigm is actually an opportunity now for autistic people and neurodivergent people to shine, because now they actually could be the new role models of how to behave in the workplace, where before the COVID, they were seen as the ones who were not able to meet the standard expectations in the workplace. So I think we have a huge opportunity here. If we do not just go back to how things were before the COVID, if we are able to take the learnings that we have and bring it back to the workplace and prepare for blended workplaces, because health crisis, I think, will come, and any company should start plan for that. But as they do it, I think the threshold for autistic and other neurodivergent persons to enter the workplace has been lowered if we kind of can put the mindset behind it to welcome people in.
This is one of those things that is part of the unexpected, but also takes us a little bit into the future of work. Because it seems like this, as you put it, Thorkil, this opens up the door for autistic people to be included perhaps more easily in under certain circumstances. And I can think of opportunities perhaps for people that might be not in the large employment centers, maybe in rural communities, have the ability to participate. And nobody knows more of this, I guess, among the three of us than Ferose, who has been working in India and who has had a great deal of experience in bringing people in from various different levels of community. Ferose, you launched the Disability Summit in India, which is running right now for, I believe, 5 years or so. What can 10 you tell? 10 years now, 10 years, wonderful. Maybe you can say a little bit about the Disability Summit, and also moving over to our next topic, which is the future. What can you tell us about that, please?
Yeah, maybe I'll just want to follow up what Thorkil mentioned about the opportunity part, and also let people know that with opportunities, you will also find new challenges. So let me share a few things that I believe will become new challenges in a kind of a post-COVID era. The first is mental health. I think mental health is going to be the biggest challenge for everyone, but specifically for people in our community I think this is something we have to keep our eyes open, because what I see happening is that there will be burnouts, and we need to find a way to identify burnouts before they happen. The number one challenge that I find happening during COVID for people on the autism spectrum is loneliness. So how do we handle loneliness? How do we measure psychological safety? These are completely new elements that become a new reality in a virtual world.
And that's why I said for us to...
And so we should be very, very aware of the challenges of remote working, especially for people on the spectrum. The other thing that I would like to speak about is, and this is something we haven't really figured it out yet, as to how to evaluate the performance and not the person. And this is something super critical, because, I think what Thorkil did is open up the job market for people on the spectrum. I think that was probably one of the biggest innovations that he could bring to the table. But I think now it's the next stage. It's not so much about getting a job. I think we've actually found that more companies want people to hire people on the spectrum than we can actually supply. So we've literally inverted the supply-demand problem. When Thorkil started it, people didn't want to hire, but today people and companies want to hire, and we don't have so many people that can fill those slots. So it's not so much about hiring people, but it's the next stage, which is, can the people on the autism spectrum succeed, and can they have a career just like everybody else? And so I think the focus has to shift to performance evaluation. And I think the biggest challenge that I see today is that when you're evaluating a person on the spectrum and his performance, and during his performance review, we have a bias to evaluate the person first, not his performance, because you already come with a tag of, oh, I'm on the spectrum. And I think that shift has to happen in the minds of managers who are managing these people. So I think these are some of the challenges, but I absolutely believe the number one challenge is mental health. This is something that many of us haven't figured it out. This is not just for, I think this is a problem for regular people as well, or so-called typical people. But I have a feeling that people on the spectrum will probably struggle with it a lot more, because they don't know how to handle it. They don't know how to give feedback. And so this is something that I believe will be the number one challenge for the future. To share a little bit of light on what Jose mentioned about the Inclusion Summit, and I was grateful that Thorkil has been part of the summit a couple of times. And the reason I started this was to really put a spotlight on disability in general. So this is not an autism summit. This is actually a disability summit or an inclusion summit where we talk about all the disabilities. And the reason I wanted to do that was to change the narrative that exists primarily in India, which is a narrative that disability is a taboo, you shouldn't speak about it. And I really wanted to bring it out in the open, to have open discussions and celebrate people's differences and not to shy away from it. And when we started this in 2012, as I said, this is the 10th year, we started with very modest aims. We never thought that it would attract, Nobel laureates and presidents and senators and across the world. And it went on to become probably one of the largest disability summit in the world, with almost 1,000 people attending in person every year and thousands over live stream. So I think there is a lot that needs to be done, but I think it's a small step in the right direction.
Thank you, Ferose. And I want to go back to some of the notes that we had from our earlier conversations. And I think we talk about the future, and we talk about enterprise, and we talk about performance, but there's another element here, Ferose, that you brought to my attention. And that was a quote by Margaret Mead that I would like for you to share, if you can, because it talks about the other part of this type of programs in what has been put together, which is the human part.
Yeah.
Maybe you can share a few thoughts about that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think when I look back at my 10 years in this journey. And there is this beautiful book that is written by a non-verbal person of the spectrum. And this is a Japanese kid who wrote this book, and it's been literally become a Bible for me, because he's really talking about what's going on in the minds of a person who's nonverbal. And I face this because my son Vivan is nonverbal. And when he was asked, what do you think is the biggest contribution of people on the autism spectrum? And he says that it is to raise human consciousness, which I think was a profound statement that he was trying to make, that there is a role for people on the spectrum because it makes everybody else better. And I can tell you that I've become a better person. I'm sure Jose and Thorkil will say the same, that they've become a better person in this journey. And so, you know, not to sound spiritual, but the reality is, and I really found it deeply insightful, that the role of sometimes people on the autism spectrum, more than anything else, is to raise human consciousness. And this goes back to something that Margaret Mead, a famous anthropologist, said. She was asked by a journalist as to what was the moment when human beings became human beings. What was the moment, and how is human beings different from, say, our monkeys? Because 99.9% of our DNA is exactly the same. So what makes human beings so unique? And what was the point when actually we showed the true human character? And she said, and she goes back to a very interesting phenomena that happened, or that point in civilization, where she said, if you look at the backbone of a femur is an animal, and they found that the remains of this particular animal thousands of years ago had shown a part of the bone was broken, but over a period of time, it had healed. And she said that was the moment that human beings truly demonstrated their character. And so the journalist was like, can you explain that? I didn't understand. How does a healing of a bone demonstrate true human character? And what she was trying to tell is that if an animal had broken the bone, and if the animal cannot move, cannot run with the pack, that was clearly the moment the animal would become a prey, would be eaten by other animals. In this particular case, they showed that the bone of the femur had actually healed, which meant that somebody had actually stopped to take care of this animal for at least 2 weeks until the bone healed. And she said that's the moment human beings truly differentiated itself from the others, that it stopped to take care of somebody who's weak. It stopped to ensure the safety of somebody who's weak until it could join the pack again. And that was the moment human beings truly differentiated itself. And I think this is a clear, an incredible message in that small story, that I think none of us should forget, that our responsibility is most important when we're able to take care of the people who can't take care of themselves, and we're able to slow down to bring them part of the group. Fundamentally, our ability to lift people up. I think if we can do that, we will retain the true character of what makes us human.
Thank you, Ferose. We've also talked in the past about the impact that these programs would have. And I remember a conversation that you and I had about 3 or 4 years ago, where you mentioned this, and I think Thorkil may have also mentioned something similar, where we will not see the impact of some of the things, this type of programs, for another 10 or 15 years, simply because we don't know how to measure them. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, yes, I think we are at the start of something that I hope will be a global movement that will be fueled by compassionate people who want to make their workplaces, their schools, their local communities better places. What we have seen so far in the workplace is that a place where autistic people thrive will be a better place for all to work. And this kind of underlines what Ferose talked about before. It has been documented at Harvard Business Review and other places by Professor Rob Austin from Ivy Business School that there are three major benefits from employment programs that include autistic and other neurodivergent persons. First is you get the vacant jobs filled with qualified, talented people. So that's good. And this is also what Ferose has mentioned, that companies should do this because they need the talent, not because of a CSR perspective. It should not be a bubble that will be popular for a while and then go away. There should be an ability to harvest the benefits from the companies. But filling vacant jobs is just one thing. The second major benefit is that it creates a higher level of engagement from co-workers. And higher engagement means higher performance, means better spirit of collaboration, more interest in helping others. And this is a major benefit. Just imagine if one autistic person get to work in a workplace and it really raises the engagement level and performance of the whole workplace. That is pretty amazing and talks into what Ferose talked about. The third major benefit is that it makes the co-workers proud of their work and their company, which is also enormously important for any employer. It probably increases retention. It creates stronger ties in the local community. It makes the company more attractive for the next generation of workforce who is not motivated primarily by scorecards and bonuses, but it has to make sense. There has to be a purpose built into your workplace. Otherwise, your workplace may not be the most attractive place to work for talented, dedicated people. And these findings make me very happy and believe that autistic people can play an important role in more social cohesion, in more fairness, more equal opportunities, and in the kind of the hardcore way of combining economic growth with a decent work, which is also the title of the Sustainable Development Goal number 8, which all countries in the world have signed up for. So I think we're at a starting point at something that will go viral and global with the global companies. And if we can get the engagement that we are seeing in companies like SAP and other big companies from employees who say, count me in as a volunteer. That's like hearing Jose talks when I first met him. He said, I have an interest in this area. If I can contribute to a better future for co-workers who are autistic, it will mean something for me and my family and my pride of work. And if we can create the biggest grassroots of people with a similar attitude, then there's no limit to what can be done.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Thorkil, and thank you so much for us. We're going to do one thing. We're going to see if we have any questions from the audience in the interest of time, because we have about 8+ minutes, and wanted to see if there's anything from the audience that that we can answer.
Jose, there was one question on the chat and I have answered it. People ask me, what is the name of the book that I was referring to in my previous session or conversation. The name of the book is The Reason I Jump by Naoki Higashida. It's clearly one of the best books I've read on the subject. I would highly recommend the book if you haven't read it already.
Well, fabulous fathers, we do have many questions for you. Ferose, how do the arts and poetry inform your work? You mentioned Margaret Mead, Naoki's work. Tell us, how does the arts, and first of all, I have to tell you, I love your alliteration. India, inclusion, invite. I can tell you, Patricia Leahy, she's keen. Have counselors are keen on alliteration, and we love the title. So talk to us about the arts of poetry.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dean Pellegrino. Such a delight to see you. You can see my background, right? That's a real background. That's not a fake background. Those are real books. So I have often said that I'm an accidental engineer. My real passion was history and literature. But really, one of the things that I've believed when it comes to innovation, and this is something that people from Steve Jobs to everybody, a lot of other thought leaders have said, that magic happens at the intersection of science and humanities. This is super important to understand, that real magic happens at the integration of science and humanities. And I think in isolation, they wouldn't create a better world. And a lot of what I've been able to do has been because I could try to bring the two completely opposite elements and fuse them together, whether it is my work at SAP, whether it is the work at the foundation, or even at the Autism program. We found that some of the best engineers also have incredible interest in arts and music, and I think that's what makes a workplace super interesting. So I think the fusion of both of them is super critical for innovation.
Totally agree. And I have two more questions. This one goes to Thorkil, and this is, I grew up in an Italian-American family, and dandelions were always part of our salads, part of making our wine. But can you please share with the group the meaning of the dandelion seed? I don't know that one. Would you talk to us?
Yes, thanks so much. I'm so happy for this question. So the dandelion is known by most people in Denmark and many other countries as an annoying weed. It gets into our lawn, it gets into our flower beds in the garden, and we spend a lot of time spraying it and get rid of it. But there are also farmers who grow dandelions as an herb or utility plant and make a living out of treating it in a friendly way, welcoming way. So what is a dandelion? Is it a weed? Is it an herb? It depends on yourself. It depends if it is in welcoming environments or unwelcoming environments. Kids love dandelions. They blow dandelions. They make fun of the plant in many ways. And the best thing you can do in the spring is to take your kid to a field with blooming dandelions, but don't take a garden owner the same place because he or she will see weeds all over the place. But a weed is just a flower in an unwanted place. So we have to fertilize the ground, and the metaphor is also relevant for autistic people. So if you see them as the ones not fitting in, the ones who should go on special programs and not fit in to the workplace or in the mainstream class settings, you're not getting to help the person realize its full potential. If you can create a little flower bed or take the dandelion from the lawn to the kitchen garden, treat it as well as other plants, you will get access to all the virtues, all the values. So our logo is the seed of the dandelion as a reminder to the world that this could be the most valuable plant for you and your household if you treat it well, just as autistic or neurodivergent persons.
Thank you. My grandfather would love that, and you touched my heart with that story, so thank you so much. Another question that just came in, fabulous fathers, do you have tips on helping kids build friendships?
Good question, Dean. I must confess, this is what I've been trying to find answers for, and I always lean on Thorkil and Jose, who are kind of ahead of me in my journey. As I said, my son is 12 years old. You know, what I've realized is that you have to be the friend for your child first. Sometimes we end up searching for friends outside, but I want to be his best friend to start with. And sometimes I think as parents, we forget that. I spend all my time trying to take him from one therapy to the other to do his homework, and forget that maybe I should be just a friend and have fun with him. I haven't had too much fun with him, I must confess. And that's one thing that I'm trying to change right now. Be his friend first before anything else. But I'm still searching for that answer. I really want him to have friends beyond me and my wife. And being nonverbal obviously makes it harder. But I don't have an answer yet. I'm still looking for that. And maybe I'll ask Jose and Thorkil, who are much more experienced and wiser than I am, for that answer.
Thank you. I'll take this one. Thank you, Ferose. This is a very interesting question. My son is 28 years old now, and one of the key concerns that my wife and I had, was this thing about friendships. And friendships come in a variety of different shapes and sizes and forms. Very early on, I remembered also that we were trying to get our son out to do something in the community so that his social interactions would improve. So we went the volunteering route, and his passion was on railroads, on trains. So we found a railroad here in Austin, Texas that operated 100% based on volunteers. So both of us arrived there, and something fabulous happened. Most of the people that were volunteering there were folks that were retired, and very quickly they all embraced my son, who was 12 years old at the time, as one of their own. I can tell you that the very first group of friends that he had was when he was 12 and his friends were 75. They were united by a topic, a passion, something that they enjoyed very much. So the one thing that I would suggest, number one, is look into the possibility of volunteering. Volunteering is good for everybody, and it's a fabulous vehicle for our children that are on the autism spectrum to experience the world while giving a little bit of themselves as well. The second thing that I would recommend is look perhaps into the school's groups. I remember that my daughter, who's also on the spectrum, was always very fascinated with anime and science fiction. And there was not such a group in the high school. So I said, if there is not one, why don't you make one? Because she did not have very many friends. The next thing, after she launched with other people, the anime club, there were about 15 kids, many of them with the same interests as her. So those are two very practical things that I would suggest. Thorkil, over to you. Maybe you have some recommendations as well.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. And I think the first one is don't be too firm in what is a friendship, what is a good friend, because it may be different for you as for the autistic individual. My son does not have a lot of friends, but one day they called from the high school and said they wanted to give him the Founders Award, not just for being a good student, but also for being a good friend. And we were totally surprised as parents. But he was actually very accommodating. He was often opening doors and greeting people. He didn't build any deep friendships on that, but he made a positive impact on many lives or moods in the school. And I think the most important thing is don't transfer your standards of friendships or acquaintances, because it may be different. But I can say that, as Ferose also said, it's very important to play. We play a lot of board games. He moved away from home a year ago, but he often comes by and we play board games, and we have a lot of fun. Of course, the best thing can do if there's a board game club in the neighborhood where he could maybe become interested, or chess or other parts where built around the motivation. And the good thing also now is that you can find a lot of peers through the internet, but don't expect that may end up in deep personal friendships in where you get to meet all the time.